In the heart of downtown Los Angeles, where the summer heat danced off the sidewalks in shimmering waves, a scene was about to unfold that would remind everyone watching that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Comment where you're watching. From today, as we witness a story that shows how a single moment can change everything. The day had started like any other on Maple Street, with its quaint row of family-owned shops and the familiar sounds of children's laughter echoing from the nearby playground. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez stood at the chain-link fence, her small fingers wrapped around the metal links as she watched her new puppy, Max, a golden retriever with eyes that sparkled with innocence, chase butterflies in the grass. The morning sun cast long shadows across the park, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of freshly cut grass and hope. But sometimes the most peaceful moments can shatter in the blink of an eye. A group of teenagers had been loitering near the corner store, their laughter carrying a sharp edge that made mothers pull their children closer and elderly shopkeepers glance nervously at their security cameras. Among them stood Jason Drake, a 17-year-old whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud. His leather jacket, despite the heat, seemed to absorb all the light around him, and his eyes held the kind of coldness that comes from years of choosing the wrong path. Emma hadn't noticed them at first, too absorbed in Max's playful antics. The puppy had been a gift from her father, a reminder that even after losing her mother to cancer last year, there was still joy to be found in the world. Max represented everything pure and good in Emma's young life: unconditional love, loyalty, and the promise of better days ahead. The peace of the morning shattered when Jason's attention turned to the little girl and her puppy. His friends watched with a mixture of anticipation and discomfort as he flicked his cigarette aside and began walking toward the fence. The sound of his heavy boots on the pavement seemed to echo with purpose, each step bringing him closer to a moment that would change multiple lives forever. What happened next would be talked about in whispered conversations across the neighborhood for months to come. Jason, with a smirk that spoke of countless unchecked cruelties, reached over the fence. Emma's small voice called out in protest as he grabbed Max by the scruff of his neck, lifting the struggling puppy off the ground. The young dog's whimpers cut through the air like tiny daggers, while Emma's tears began to fall. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling with the kind of fear no child should ever have to experience. "Please, don't hurt him." But Jason's response was a laugh that echoed off the brick walls of nearby buildings, a sound devoid of empathy or remorse. His friends shifted uncomfortably, but none stepped forward to stop what was about to happen. The moment hung in the air like a suspended drop of water, waiting to fall. And then, through the tension-filled atmosphere, came the sound of tires slowing to a stop. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, its engine purring with quiet authority. The window rolled down, revealing a face that had graced countless movie posters and action films: Bruce Willis, his expression hard as granite as he took in the scene before him. What happened in the next few minutes would become the stuff of local legend, a reminder that sometimes justice arrives in the most unexpected packages. But more than that, it would become a story about choices. The choice to stand up against cruelty, the choice to protect the innocent, and the choice that every person faces when confronted with the opportunity to either walk away or make a difference. The air grew thick with anticipation as Bruce stepped out of his vehicle, his movements deliberate and purposeful. He hadn't planned on stopping in this neighborhood. He was supposed to be heading to a film set across town, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. The universe had conspired to place him exactly where he needed to be, at precisely the right moment. Jason's gang of followers began to whisper among themselves, recognition dawning in their eyes. But Jason, too caught up in his own display of dominance, remained oblivious to the approaching storm. His attention was fixed on the small puppy in his grasp and the tears streaming down Emma's face. The morning sun caught the silver in Bruce's hair as he approached, his footsteps measured and confident. Years of playing heroes on screen had taught him how to command attention, but this wasn't acting. This was real life, with real consequences and real opportunities to make a difference. Emma's eyes widened as she recognized him, a flicker of hope breaking through her fear. Max continued to whimper, his small body trembling in Jason's grip. The moment was building toward something inevitable, like thunder following lightning. Bruce's presence seemed to fill the entire street, drawing the attention of shopkeepers, who peeked out from behind their displays, and pedestrians, who slowed their pace to witness what was unfolding. The morning had started as any other, but it was about to become something extraordinary. The story that followed would be shared countless times, passed from person to person like a modern-day parable. It would remind people that heroes don't always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they appear in the most unexpected moments, wearing casual clothes and carrying nothing but their conviction that wrong must be made right. This is a story about more than just a confrontation between a Hollywood star and a troubled teen. It's about the ripples that spread out from single acts of kindness or cruelty, about the power of choosing to stand up when standing by would be easier, and about the moments that define who we are as human beings. As Bruce Willis stood there, his presence commanding attention from everyone on the street, the scene was set for something remarkable. The kind of moment that reminds us all that in the face of cruelty, there are still those willing to step forward and make a stand. The morning sun continued to rise over Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the park, but all attention was focused on the drama unfolding by the chain-link fence. A little girl's tears, a puppy's whimpers, a bully's sneer, and an unexpected hero's arrival. All the elements were in place for a story that would be remembered long after the sun had set. What happened next would prove that sometimes the most powerful messages come not from grand speeches or elaborate plans, but from simple acts of courage in the face of wrongdoing. The stage was set for a lesson that would resonate far beyond the boundaries of this small neighborhood park. The world seemed to hold its breath as Bruce took another step forward, his expression carrying the weight of every hero he'd ever portrayed. On screen, but with something more, the authentic determination of a man unwilling to stand by while innocence suffered. This wasn't about cameras or scripts or box office numbers. This was about something far more fundamental, the choice between right and wrong, between action and inaction, between being a bystander and being a hero. As Jason turned to face the approaching figure, still holding Max in his cruel grip, the morning air crackled with tension. In that moment, everyone present understood they were about to witness something they would never forget. A reminder that in this world, there are still those who will stand up against cruelty, no matter the cost. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the next few moments would change everything. But before we reveal what happened next, remember that this story isn't just about Bruce Willis or Jason or even little Emma and her puppy Max. It's about all of us and the choices we make when confronted with injustice. It's about the hero that exists in every person, waiting for the moment to emerge. The question hanging in the air wasn't just about what Bruce would do next. It was about what any of us would do in that situation. Would we step forward or step back? Would we find the courage to stand up for what's right, or would we join the silent majority who watch from the sidelines? As the morning sun continued its climb into the Los Angeles sky, those questions were about to be answered in a way that would leave an indelible mark on everyone present. The story of what happened next would be told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism happen not on movie sets with special effects and carefully choreographed action, but in quiet neighborhoods where real courage means standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. The neighborhood seemed to freeze in that moment, as if someone had pressed pause on the world. The morning light caught the silver badge of Officer Martinez, who was grabbing coffee at the corner shop when the scene began to unfold. She watched, like everyone else, knowing that sometimes the best course of action was to let things play out naturally. After 20 years on the force, she had developed an instinct for these moments, when to intervene and when to let destiny take its course. Bruce Willis stood there, his presence radiating the kind of quiet confidence that comes, not from movie scripts but from years of real-life experience. His casual attire, a simple grey t-shirt and jeans, made him look more approachable than his action hero persona, but there was no mistaking the authority in his stance. He had been driving to the set of his latest film, a small, independent project about redemption and second chances, when fate had other plans. The small crowd that had gathered maintained a respectful distance, their phones surprisingly absent from their hands. Something about the gravity of the moment made them realize that some things shouldn't be recorded. They should be witnessed, remembered, and retold. The morning air was thick with anticipation, carrying the scent of fresh bread from Angelo's bakery, mixed with the metallic tang of approaching rain. Jason's grip on Max hadn't loosened, but something in his eyes had changed. The cockiness that had driven him to this point began to waver, like a flame in the wind. His leather jacket, a shield he had hidden behind for so long, suddenly felt heavy on his shoulders. The young man's history was written in the scars on his knuckles and the hardness in his eyes, a story of foster homes, broken promises, and the kind of anger that comes from feeling invisible in a world too busy to notice. Emma stood frozen, her small hands still gripping the chain-link fence, her dark pigtails slightly askew from the morning's play. Her yellow sundress, dotted with tiny daisies, stood out against the grey urban backdrop like a flower growing through concrete. The tears on her cheeks caught the sunlight, turning them into tiny prisms that reflected the hope and fear battling in her heart. Behind the crowd, Mrs. Chen from the laundromat watched from her storefront, her weathered hands clasped together in prayer. She had seen Jason grow up, watched him transform from a bright-eyed child into the angry young man who now stood before them. She remembered how he used to help her carry boxes of detergent every Tuesday, back before the darkness took hold. Tight, weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present, like the heaviness in the air before a storm breaks. Bruce took another step forward, his movements measured and deliberate. His eyes, which had witnessed countless stage conflicts on movie sets, now held something deeper, a recognition of real pain, real consequences, and real opportunity. For change, Jason's friends had backed away, forming a loose semicircle behind him. Among them stood Kevin, Jason's closest friend since childhood, who had watched helplessly as his friend spiraled deeper into anger and rebellion. Kevin's hands were shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders hunched with the weight of knowing. He should have done something sooner. Max's whimpers had quieted to a soft whine, as if the puppy somehow understood the significance of what was unfolding. His golden fur ruffled slightly in the morning breeze, and his eyes, still full of trust despite his current situation, moved between Jason and Bruce, then back to Emma. The neighborhood itself seemed to be holding its breath. The usual morning. Sounds, car horns, distant sirens, the chatter of pedestrians had faded into the background, creating a bubble of silence around the scene. The old oak tree in the park cast dappled shadows across the ground, its leaves rustling with ancient wisdom about cycles of pain and healing. Bruce's shadow stretched out before him, reaching toward Jason like an offering. His presence seemed to fill more space than his physical form, carrying with it not just the weight of his Hollywood persona, but something more authentic, the gravity of a man who had seen enough of both fiction and reality to know the difference between playing a hero and being one. The morning sun continued its climb, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk where discarded candy wrappers danced in the gentle breeze. The graffiti on the nearby wall, usually an eyesore, seemed to take on new meaning, bold letters spelling out hope in faded blue paint, as if the universe itself had placed it there for this very moment. Officer Martinez shifted her weight, her hand instinctively moving toward her hip, but something in Bruce's stance told her to wait. This wasn't a moment for badges and handcuffs. It was a moment for something else, something that couldn't be enforced by law, but had to come from within. The chain-link fence rattled slightly as Emma's grip tightened, the sound cutting through, the tension like a knife. Her small voice, barely a whisper, carried across the space between them. "Please." It wasn't clear whether she was speaking to Jason or Bruce, but perhaps it didn't matter. That single word held all the weight of innocence confronting cruelty, of hope facing despair. Jason's friends exchanged glances, their usual bravado crumbling in the face of real consequence. Among them, a girl named Lisa watched with particular intensity. She had known Jason before the anger, before the walls he built around himself. She saw something in his eyes now that she hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty. The morning traffic continued to flow on the main street a block away, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this small pocket of the city. But here, in this moment, time seemed to move differently. Each second stretched out, heavy with possibility and consequence. Bruce's expression remained calm, but his eyes never left Jason's face. He saw beyond the tough exterior, beyond the leather jacket and the practiced sneer. He saw what everyone else had missed. A kid fighting his own battles, using the wrong weapons against the wrong enemies. The wind picked up slightly, carrying with it the distant sound of church bells. Sunday morning services would be starting soon, calling people to reflection and redemption. The timing seemed almost too perfect, as if the universe itself was setting the stage for what would happen next. Mrs. Chen had stepped out of her laundromat now, her small frame radiating concern and compassion. She remembered the day Jason's mother left, how the boy had sat on her steps for hours, refusing to cry, refusing to speak. She had brought him hot chocolate and sat with him in silence, watching as something inside him began to harden. The morning light caught the silver chain around Jason's neck, a St. Christopher medal, tarnished and worn. A gift from his grandmother. Before she passed, it was the only piece of his past he hadn't pawned or thrown away, though he'd never admit to anyone why he kept it. Emma's puppy Max had stopped struggling, his warm brown eyes fixed on Jason's face with that unique canine wisdom that sometimes seems deeper than human understanding. The dog's trust, even in the face of cruelty, stood as a silent testimony to the possibility of something better. The crowd had grown slightly, but maintained its respectful distance. Among them stood Mr. Grayson, Jason's former middle school teacher, who had seen the spark of potential in the boy before life's harsh lessons began to extinguish it. He watched now with a mixture of sadness and hope, wondering if this moment might be the turning point he had always prayed for. Bruce's stance remained relaxed but ready, his years of action movie experience translating into real-world presence. But there was something else in his bearing, not the rehearsed moves of a movie star, but the authentic concern of a human being confronting another's pain. The morning sun had risen higher now, eliminating the long shadows and illuminating the scene with stark clarity. There was nowhere to hide anymore, not for Jason, not for anyone. The moment of truth was approaching, carried on the wings of consequence and possibility. Officer Martinez had moved slightly closer, but still maintained her distance. In her 20 years on the force, she had learned that some situations required a badge, while others required something more fundamental: understanding, patience, and the space for change to occur naturally. The chain-link fence stood as a physical barrier between Emma and her puppy, but it represented something more: the barriers we build between ourselves and others, between who we are and who we could be. Its shadow fell in perfect lines across the concrete, like bars holding back the possibility of transformation. Jason's grip on Max had loosened slightly, though he might not have realized it himself. Something was shifting inside him, visible only in the subtle changes of his expression, the slight tremor in his hands. The power he had felt moments ago was draining away, replaced by something else. Uncertainty, recognition, perhaps even the first glimmer of regret. The neighborhood held its breath, watching as this scene continued to unfold. Every person present understood they were witnessing something more than a confrontation between a troubled teen and a movie star. They were watching the precise moment when change became possible, when the script of one's life could be rewritten. Bruce took another step forward, and in that movement was every role he had ever played, every hero he had portrayed, but more importantly, every real moment of human connection he had experienced. This wasn't about fame or cameras or action sequences. This was about one human, reaching out to another across the divide of pain and misunderstanding. The morning waited, pregnant with possibility, as the scene continued to unfold. The story had moved beyond simple confrontation into something more profound, a moment of potential transformation that would leave its mark on everyone present, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism involve not physical strength, but the courage to see the humanity in others, even when they've forgotten it themselves. Jason's laugh cut through the morning air like broken glass, a sound that carried more pain than humor. "Well, look who it is," he sneered, trying to mask his uncertainty with bravado. "Hollywood's biggest hero, coming to save the day." His fingers tightened around Max's scruff again, causing the puppy to let out a small yelp that echoed off the brick walls surrounding them. Bruce remained motionless, his eyes never leaving Jason's face. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the dramatic intensity of his movie roles. Instead, it was quiet, measured, almost gentle. "We both know this isn't about the dog," he said, taking another careful step forward. The concrete beneath his feet still held the morning's coolness, a contrast to the growing heat of the confrontation. Behind Jason, his friends shifted uncomfortably. The script they were used to, intimidation, mockery, the casual cruelty that had become their armor, suddenly seemed inadequate. This wasn't how their morning was supposed to go. Their usual audience of fearful neighbors and averted gazes had been replaced by something entirely different, a witness they couldn't intimidate. "You don't know anything about me," Jason spat, but his voice carried a tremor that betrayed him. His leather jacket felt too heavy now, too obvious a costume. "This isn't one of your movies. You can't just walk in here and play hero," he tried, to summon the anger that had served him so well in the past, but it felt hollow in the face of Bruce's calm demeanor. Emma's quiet sobs provided a heartbreaking soundtrack to the scene, each tear carrying the weight of innocence confronting cruelty. Max had stopped struggling, his brown eyes fixed on Bruce with an almost human understanding of the situation. The morning sun caught the puppy's golden fur, creating a halo effect that seemed to emphasize the absurdity of the violence being threatened. "You're right," Bruce replied, his voice carrying the weight of genuine understanding rather than condescension. "This isn't a movie. There's no script, no second takes, no special effects. Just choices. Real choices with real consequences." He took another step forward, close enough now that Jason had to tilt his head slightly to maintain eye contact. "And right now, you're making a choice that will stay with you a lot longer than you think." Officer Martinez watched from her position near the coffee shop, her hand still resting lightly on her hip. She recognized something in Bruce's approach. Not the rehearsed lines of an actor, but the authentic concern of someone who understood that sometimes the biggest battles are fought in the smallest moments. Jason's laugh this time was shorter, sharper, more defensive. "What do you care? You'll be gone in 5 minutes, back to your fancy car and your perfect life. Meanwhile, I'll still be here in this neighborhood where nobody becomes anything." The words tumbled out before he could stop them, carrying more truth than he'd intended to reveal. Bruce's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You think I was born into movies?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of something that made Jason's certainty waver. "That I never had to fight for anything? Never had to prove myself? Never felt like the world had already decided who I was? Supposed to be?" The crowd had grown larger, but the silence remained absolute. Even the usual morning traffic seemed muted, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Mrs. Chen had moved closer to Emma, her presence offering what comfort she could while the drama continued to unfold. "You want to talk about perfect lives?" Bruce continued, his voice carrying no judgment, only understanding. "Let me tell you about working as a security guard, about bartending to make ends meet, about hearing no so many times you start to believe it." Each word landed with the weight of lived experience, not rehearsed dialogue. Jason's grip on Max loosened slightly, though he didn't seem aware of it. "You're trying to trick me," he accused, but the words lacked conviction. "This is just another act." His free hand clenched into a fist, knuckles white with tension, but there was uncertainty in his stance now. "No tricks," Bruce replied simply. "No act. Just one person talking to another about choices." He gestured slightly toward Emma, whose tears had slowed as she watched the exchange with wide eyes. "About what kind of person you want to be when that little girl remembers this moment years from now." The morning sun had risen higher, eliminating the shadows that had earlier provided places to hide. Jason felt exposed, not just physically but emotionally, as if Bruce's words were stripping away layers of carefully constructed armor. "You don't understand," Jason said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can't just walk away from who you are, from what everyone expects you to be." The words carried the weight of years of assumptions, judgments, and self-fulfilling prophecies. Bruce's response was immediate, carried on a voice that had commanded attention on screens worldwide, but now spoke with intimate understanding. "Who said anything about walking away? This isn't about walking away. It's about walking towards something better." The wind had picked up slightly, carrying with it the scent of possibility and change. Max's tail wagged slightly, as if the puppy sensed the shifting emotional currents in the air. Emma's hands had loosened their death grip on the chain-link fence, her eyes moving between Bruce and Jason with growing hope. "You think it's that easy?" Jason challenged, but the anger in his voice had been replaced by something else. Longing, perhaps, or the first tentative reaches toward understanding. "Just decide to be different and everything changes?" Bruce shook his head slowly. "Not easy," he corrected. "Nothing worth doing ever is. But possible. Always possible." He gestured toward the gathered crowd, toward Mrs. Chen with her worried eyes, toward Officer Martinez with her hand still resting near her weapon. "You think these people are here because they're waiting to see you fail? They're here because part of them still believes in the kid who used to help carry boxes of detergent every Tuesday." Jason's head snapped up, surprise breaking through. His carefully maintained facade. His eyes found Mrs. Chen in the crowd, saw the recognition and hope in her face. Something shifted in his expression, a crack appearing in the wall he'd built around himself. "You're not as invisible as you think," Bruce continued, his voice gentle but firm, "and you're definitely not as forgotten as you feel." He took another step forward, close enough now that he could have reached out and touched Max. "The question is, what are you going to do with that information?" The morning had grown warmer, but Jason felt a shiver run through him. The leather jacket that had served as his armor suddenly felt like a costume, something he'd put on to play a part he'd never really chosen for himself. Emma's voice broke through the tension, small but clear. "He used to pet Max sometimes," she said, drawing everyone's attention. "When he thought nobody was watching, he was nice then." The simple observation carried the weight of truth that only children seem able to deliver. Jason's carefully constructed world of anger and defiance trembled at the edges. The puppy in his hands, no longer struggling, looked up at him with eyes that held no judgment, only the infinite capacity for forgiveness the dog seemed to possess. "Here's the thing about roles," Bruce said, his words carrying the weight of someone who had spent a lifetime playing different parts. "The only ones that really matter are the ones we choose for ourselves. Everything else is just rehearsal." The morning light caught the silver of Jason's St. Christopher medal, making it shine like a beacon. The same light touched the tears that had begun to form in his eyes, though he would have denied their existence if asked. "But everyone," Jason started, his voice catching, everyone expects what they've been shown," Bruce interrupted gently. "Show them something different, they'll expect something different." He gestured toward Max, still patient in Jason's increasingly gentle grip. "That dog doesn't remember the times you were kind to him by accident. He just remembers the kindness." The crowd had grown silent again, sensing the importance of the moment. Officer Martinez had relaxed her stance slightly, recognizing that this situation would be resolved not with handcuffs, but with understanding. "It's not just about this moment," Bruce continued, his voice carrying the kind of truth that transcends scripts and stages. "It's about every moment that comes after, every choice, every opportunity to be the person you actually want to be, not the person you think you have to be." Jason's world, built on the foundation of anger and rebellion, was cracking at the seams. The morning sun seemed brighter somehow, more revealing, as if illuminating possibilities he'd never allowed himself to see before. "I don't know how," he admitted, the words barely audible, but carrying the weight of mountains being moved. Bruce's response was immediate and sincere. "Nobody does at first. That's why we help each other figure it out." He gestured toward the gathered crowd, each face reflecting a different aspect of hope and possibility. "That's why we're all here." The morning waited, pregnant with possibility, as Jason stood at the crossroads of who he had been and who he could become. The choice hung in the air like a suspended moment, ready to fall in whatever direction he decided to push it. Max's tail wagged again, a gentle thump against Jason's arm, as if offering encouragement for the choice that lay before him. Emma's tears had dried, leaving tracks that caught the sunlight like tiny rivers of hope. The neighborhood held its breath, watching as one of its lost sons stood on the precipice of change, supported by an unlikely alliance of a Hollywood star, a puppy's unconditional love, and a community that had never truly given up hope. The moment stretched out, filled with the weight of possibility and the promise of transformation. What happened next would define not just this morning, but countless mornings to come. For Jason, for Emma, for Max, and for everyone watching. This scene unfolded. The tension in the air crystallized as Jason's friends began to murmur among themselves, their usual bravado crumbling in the face of authentic emotion. Kevin, who had known Jason the longest, took a hesitant step forward, then stopped, caught between loyalty to his friend and the undeniable truth of the moment unfolding before them. "You think this changes anything?" Jason's voice carried a desperate edge now, like a cornered animal making its last stand. "You think one conversation with Bruce Willis makes everything different?" His grip on Max had grown so gentle it was barely there, the puppy now sitting calmly in his arms rather than struggling to escape. Bruce's response was measured, his voice carrying the weight of experience rather than judgment. "No," he said simply. The conversation doesn't change anything, but the choices you make after it, those change everything. He gestured toward the St. Christopher medal glinting at Jason's neck. Someone gave you that because they believed in who you could become. Maybe it's time you did too. The morning sun had reached its full strength now, casting stark light across the scene that left no room for shadows or hiding places. Emma had stopped crying, her young face showing the kind of wisdom children sometimes possess in moments of profound change. She watched Jason with eyes that held not fear, but understanding beyond her years. Officer Martinez had moved closer to Mrs. Chen, both women recognizing that they were witnessing something far more significant than a simple confrontation. The gathered crowd had grown larger, but the silence remained respectful, as if they understood that noise might shatter this delicate moment of possibility. "You don't know what it's like," Jason continued, his voice dropping to barely above. A whisper, walking these streets every day, knowing everyone's already decided who you are, what you're going to become. His words carried the weight of years of expectations and prejudgments, each one a brick in the wall he'd built around himself. Bruce took another step forward, close enough now that Jason could see the lines of experience etched in his face, so different from the smooth perfection of movie posters. "You're right," he admitted. "I don't know exactly what it's like to walk in your shoes. But I know what it's like to have people look at you and think they know everything about you, to have them decide your limits before you've even had a chance to find them yourself." The wind picked up slightly, carrying with it the distant sound of children playing in the park around the corner, their laughter a reminder of simpler times. Max's tail wagged gently, brushing against Jason's leather jacket in a rhythm that seemed to match the beating of his increasingly uncertain heart. "It's not that simple," Jason protested, but his voice had lost its edge of defiance. "You can't just decide to be different and make it happen." His eyes darted to his friends, to Mrs. Chen, to Officer Martinez, all the witnesses to who he had been and who he might become. Bruce's response came with the kind of quiet authority that needed no volume to command attention. "No, it's not. Simple. It's probably the hardest thing you'll ever do. But right now, in this moment, you have something most people never get. A clear choice, a defining moment, a line in the sand between who you were and who you want to be." The morning light caught the tears that had begun to form in Jason's eyes, turning them into diamonds of possibility. His leather jacket, which had served as armor for so long, suddenly felt heavy on his shoulders, like the weight of expectations he'd been carrying without realizing it. Emma's voice broke through the tension again, small but clear as a bell. "I saw you leave food for the stray cats behind the grocery store," she said, drawing surprised looks from the crowd. "You thought nobody saw, but I did. You're not as mean as you pretend to be." The words hit Jason like a physical force, cracking the facade he'd maintained for so long. His friends shifted uncomfortably, seeing their leader in a new light, watching as the carefully constructed image began to crumble. "Sometimes," Bruce continued, seizing the moment, "the hardest person to convince of your worth is yourself. But look around, Jason, really look. Every person here is waiting, hoping, believing that you'll make the right choice. Not because they expect it, but because they remember who you were before the world convinced you to be someone else." Mrs. Chen stepped forward then, her small frame carrying an authority born of years watching over the neighborhood. "I still have the thank you card you made me," she said softly, "from when your grandmother passed. You drew flowers on it, beautiful flowers." The revelation seemed to strike Jason physically, causing him to sway slightly where he stood. Max took the opportunity to lick his chin, a gentle reminder of the capacity for affection that existed in the world. "But I've done so many things," Jason started, his voice breaking. "Said so many things. The past is just practice." Bruce interrupted gently. "Every actor knows that. What matters is what you do when the real scene starts. And this right here, this is your scene, Jason. Your moment." The morning had grown warmer, but Jason felt a shiver run through him as the truth of Bruce's words sank in. The puppy in his arms had completely relaxed now, trusting and calm, as if knowing that the danger had passed even before Jason himself had realized it. Kevin, unable to remain silent any longer, spoke up from the crowd. "He's right, Jay," he said, using the childhood nickname that had been abandoned years ago. "This tough guy thing. It was never really you. We all just went along with it because it seemed easier than fighting it." The words seemed to hang in the air, each one a key unlocking something long buried in Jason's heart. His grip on Max had become almost tender, the puppy now cradled rather than restrained. "But what if I fail?" The question came out small, vulnerable, the voice of the child he had been rather than the tough persona he'd created. "What if I try to be different and it doesn't work?" Bruce's response was immediate and genuine. "Then you try again, and again, and again. That's what strength really is, not never falling, but always getting back up." He gestured toward Emma, still watching with hope-filled eyes. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you want to change." The morning sun had reached its zenith, bathing the scene in clear, unforgiving light that seemed to strip away pretense and pretending. Officer Martinez had completely relaxed her stance now, recognizing that the crisis point had passed, transformed into something else entirely. "I remember," Mrs. Chen said softly, "the day you helped me clean up after those vandals broke my window. You worked for hours, didn't take a penny. That's who you really are, Jason. The other stuff, that's just a costume you've been wearing." Jason looked down at Max, then at Emma, then at the gathered crowd. Faces he had known his whole life, people he had pushed away in his determination to be what he thought he had to be. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, not crushing but clarifying, like pressure turning coal into diamonds. "I don't know how to start over," he admitted, the words carrying both fear and hope. "I don't know how to be different." Bruce's voice carried the weight of every role he'd ever played, but more importantly, every real moment of transformation he'd witnessed. "You already have," he said simply. "The moment you admitted you wanted to change, you already began. Everything else is just practice." The morning seemed to hold its breath as Jason stood there, suspended between who he had been and who he could become. Max's warm presence in his arms offered comfort, while Emma's hopeful gaze promised forgiveness and new beginnings. "The hardest part," Bruce continued, his voice gentle but firm, "is forgiving yourself. The rest, making amends, earning trust, building a new reputation, that's just work. Hard work, but straightforward. Forgiving yourself? That's the real challenge." The words resonated through the gathered crowd, touching something universal in the human experience. Officer Martinez nodded slightly, remembering her own moments of transformation, while Mrs. Chen wiped a tear from her eye. Jason's friends had drawn closer now, no longer a gang, but a group of kids watching their leader navigate the difficult waters of change. Their presence offered silent support, acknowledging that transformation didn't have to mean walking alone. The morning light caught the silver of Jason's St. Christopher medal again, seeming to illuminate it from within. The patron saint of travelers, watching over one more soul, making the journey from lost to found. "Maybe," Jason said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of revelation, "maybe it's time to try something different." The words came out tentative, but genuine, like the first steps on a new path. The neighborhood seemed to exhale collectively, as if releasing a breath held for far too long. The moment stretched out, filled with the possibility of redemption and the promise of change, as Jason stood at the crossroads of who he had been and who he might become. The morning seemed to pause, suspended in a moment of infinite possibility. As Jason slowly lowered himself to one knee, bringing Max gently to the ground, the puppy's tail wagged furiously as his paws touched the concrete, but instead of running away, he stayed close to Jason, looking up at him with unconditional forgiveness in his brown eyes. "I'm sorry," Jason said, his voice carrying none of its former bravado. The words weren't directed at Bruce or even at Emma. They were spoken to Max, a quiet confession between a troubled soul and an innocent heart. The puppy responded by licking his hand, a simple gesture that carried more weight than any human words could convey. Bruce watched the interaction with knowing eyes, recognizing the moment for what it was. Not just an apology to a puppy, but the first crack in a wall that had taken years to build. The morning sun caught the moisture in Jason's eyes, turning each unshed tear into a prism of possibility. What happened next would be talked about in the neighborhood for years to come, retold in coffee shops and at family dinners, a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes come in the quietest moments. Emma, displaying the pure instinct of childhood, slipped through the gap in the fence that she used to play with Max. Before anyone could stop her, she had crossed the distance between them. Officer Martinez took a half step forward, but Bruce raised his hand slightly, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. This wasn't a moment for adult intervention. It was a moment for something more fundamental, more pure. Emma stood before Jason, her yellow sundress catching the morning light, her small frame carrying the kind of courage that comes only from absolute innocence. "I saw you," she said simply, her voice clear and unwavering. "Last week, when those bigger kids were picking on Tommy Martinez, you made them stop. You thought nobody saw, but I did." The revelation rippled through the crowd. Officer Martinez's eyes widened slightly. She had been looking for whoever had defended her nephew, had wanted to thank them. The piece of information landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of understanding through the gathered community. Jason's carefully constructed facade cracked further, emotions playing across his face like shadows on water. "He reminded me of my little brother," he whispered, the words seemingly pulled from somewhere deep inside him. "Before the foster system split us up." The morning air grew thick with unspoken understanding. Mrs. Chen pressed her hands to her heart, remembering the day she had watched social services take the two boys away, remembered Jason's small face pressed against the car window, trying so hard not to cry. Bruce's voice cut through the heavy silence, carrying the weight of recognition. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "we hurt others because we're trying to make the world feel what we feel inside. But sometimes who we really are shows through despite our best efforts to hide it." As if on cue, a police car pulled up to the curb, its arrival notably lacking sirens or flashing lights. The officer who stepped out wasn't a stranger. It was Michael Torres, Jason's brother, now wearing the badge of the LAPD. The crowd parted silently, creating a path between the brothers who hadn't seen each other in 8 years. The reveal landed like a thunderclap in clear sky. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the familiar face, now older, more mature, but undeniably the little brother he had tried so hard to protect. Michael's eyes held no judgment, only understanding and a depth of emotion that transcended their years of separation. "Got a call about a disturbance," Michael said, his voice steady despite the emotion clearly visible in his eyes. "Didn't know I'd find you here, Jay." He paused, taking in the scene, Bruce Willis standing. Nearby, Emma in her yellow dress, Max sitting contentedly by Jason's feet. "Looks like you're finally letting people see who you really are." The morning light seemed to intensify, highlighting the tears that now flowed freely down Jason's cheeks. His leather jacket, the armor he had hidden behind for so long, suddenly felt foreign on his shoulders. With trembling hands, he slipped it off, revealing a faded t-shirt underneath. one that Michael recognized instantly. "You kept it?" Michael said softly, recognizing the shirt he had given Jason on their last day together, before different foster homes had torn them apart. "All these years." The revelation seemed to touch something deep in everyone present. Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes with her apron, while Officer Martinez discreetly wiped away her own tears. Bruce stood quietly, understanding that his role in this drama had shifted. He was no longer the catalyst for change, but a witness, too, something far more powerful. "I never stopped looking for you," Jason admitted, his voice breaking. "Every time I got in trouble, every time I ended up at the station, I was hoping—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Michael understood. "I know," Michael replied, taking a step closer. "I saw your name on reports sometimes, wanted to reach out, but they said I had to wait until you were ready." He gestured to his uniform. "Became a cop, hoping I'd find you someday. Guess today's the day." Emma, still standing close to Jason, reached up and took his hand in her small one. The gesture, simple and pure, seemed to break something loose in Jason's heart. Max pressed against his leg, offering silent support, while Bruce watched the scene unfold with the kind of understanding that comes from having played many roles, but recognizing real emotion when he sees it. "Your brother," Bruce said quietly, "became a cop to find you. You protected kids who reminded you of him. Sometimes who we really are shows through in the moments we think no one is watching." The morning had grown warmer, but the heat was different. Now, not oppressive, but nurturing, like the warmth of long-delayed healing. Jason's friends had drawn closer, no longer a gang, but a group of witnesses to transformation, their own faces reflecting varying degrees of understanding and hope. Michael closed the distance between them, and without hesitation, pulled his brother into an embrace that spoke of years of missed opportunities and unspoken words. The crowd watched in respectful silence as 8 years of separation dissolved in a moment of recognition and reconciliation. "I tried to be strong," Jason whispered into his brother's shoulder, words meant only for Michael, but carrying to those nearest. "Tried to be tough enough that nothing could hurt me, like losing you did." "I know," Michael responded, his voice thick with emotion. "But you don't have to be tough anymore. You don't have to be anything except who you really are." Bruce's voice carried clearly in the morning air, speaking not just to Jason, but to everyone present. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let people see our real selves. Everything else, all the poses, all the pretending, that's just hiding from who we could be." Emma tugged gently on Jason's hand, drawing his attention. "Does this mean you'll play with Max sometimes?" she asked, the innocent question carrying layers of meaning that made the adults present smile through their tears. "He always liked you, even when you pretended to be mean." The morning light caught the St. Christopher medal once more, but now it seemed less like a relic of the past and more like a beacon pointing toward the future. Jason looked down at Emma, then at Max, then at his brother in his police uniform. All the pieces of who he was and who he could be coming together in a moment of clarity. "Yeah," he said softly, a genuine smile breaking through years of practiced sneers. "Yeah, I think I'd like that." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of transformation, of choices made and paths chosen. The gathered crowd began to move, not dispersing but drawing closer, each person wanting to be part of this moment of change. Mrs. Chen stepped forward with tears in her eyes, reaching up to cup Jason's face in her weathered hands. "Welcome back," she said simply, the words carrying years of patient waiting. The morning had become something else entirely, not a confrontation between good and evil, but a testament to the power of recognition, reconciliation, and the courage to change. Bruce stood quietly to the side, understanding that his role had been not to force change, but to create the space where change could happen naturally. Officer Martinez spoke into her radio, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "Situation resolved," she said simply. "Family reunion in progress." The words seemed to hang in the air, an official recognition of the transformation they had all witnessed. The morning sun continued its journey across the sky, but the light it cast seemed different now, less about illuminating differences, and more about highlighting connections. The neighborhood had witnessed something profound, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism involve not physical strength, but the courage to be who we really are. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Street as the crowd began to disperse, not in a rush, but in the gentle way that people leave a place where something profound has occurred. Each person carried with them a piece of the morning's transformation, a reminder that change doesn't always come with fanfare and fireworks, but sometimes in quiet moments of recognition and truth. Bruce Willis stood with his back against his black SUV, watching as Jason and Michael sat on the park bench. 8 years of separation, dissolving in a flood of shared memories and quiet conversations. Emma had settled cross-legged on the grass nearby. Max contentedly sprawled across her lap, his tail wagging whenever Jason would glance his way. "You know," Bruce said quietly to Officer Martinez, who had stayed to ensure the situation remained peaceful. "In movies, we try to capture moments like this, spend millions on special effects and dramatic scores, but nothing we create ever quite matches the real thing." The officer nodded, understanding that she had witnessed something far more powerful than any scripted drama. "Sometimes," she replied, "the best endings aren't endings at all. They're beginnings in disguise." Mrs. Chen had disappeared briefly into her laundromat, returning with a faded photo album that drew Jason's immediate attention. Inside were pictures of 2 young boys, Jason and Michael, helping her sort laundry, their smiles untouched by the hardships that would later separate them. The images sparked conversations, stories flowing between the brothers as they rebuilt the bridge that time and circumstance had broken. "Remember that summer," Michael was saying, "when Mrs. Chen would save the quarters from the dryers for us? Said we earned them by helping with the folding?" His voice carried the warmth of cherished memories finally shared. Jason's laugh, when it came, was nothing like the harsh sound from earlier. It was genuine, unguarded. The laugh of the boy he had been before life taught him to be hard. "She'd always make sure there was enough for 2 ice creams from Mr. Garcia's cart," he recalled, glancing gratefully at Mrs. Chen. The afternoon light caught the tears in Mrs. Chen's eyes as she watched the brothers reconnect. She had kept faith all these years, believing that somewhere inside the angry young man was the kind-hearted boy she had known. Her patience had been rewarded in ways no one could have predicted. Kevin, who had remained quiet through much of the morning's events, finally stepped forward. "Jay," he said, using the childhood nickname that now felt right again. "Remember when we first started hanging out? You told me we had to be tough because the world was tough." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Maybe we were wrong about that. Bruce pushed himself away from his SUV, his movement drawing attention without demanding it. "Being tough," he said, his voice carrying the weight of experience, "isn't about not feeling. It's about feeling everything and still choosing to be kind. That's the hardest thing of all." Emma, still sitting with Max, looked up at Jason with the unfiltered honesty of childhood. "Are you going to stop pretending to be mean now?" she asked, the question cutting through pretense with laser precision. The afternoon seemed to hold its breath as Jason considered her words. His hand unconsciously went to the St. Christopher medal, touching it like a talisman. "Yeah," he said. Finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Yeah, I think I am. Turns out it's pretty exhausting being someone you're not." Michael, now in his police uniform that symbolized everything Jason had once claimed to hate, reached out and squeezed his brother's shoulder. "You know," he said quietly, "the force has a youth outreach program. Kids who've been through the system, kids who need someone who understands, someone who's walked their path." The suggestion hung in the air like a promise, a possible future that had never seemed available before. Jason's eyes widened slightly as he understood what his brother was offering, not just reconciliation, but purpose. Bruce, recognizing the importance of the moment, spoke up. "Every good story," he said, "has a moment where the hero has to choose who they're going to be, but the real heroes, they make that choice every day, in small ways that most people never see." The afternoon light had softened, taking on the golden quality that photographers call the magic hour. It touched everything with a gentle glow. The brothers on the bench, Emma with Max, Mrs. Chen with her photo album, Bruce leaning against his car, Officer Martinez standing watch over them, all. "You know what the hardest part was?" Jason asked suddenly, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "Not the fighting, or the tough guy act, or even pushing people away. The hardest part was believing I couldn't be anything else, that I was stuck being who everyone thought I was." Bruce nodded, understanding written across his features. "That's the thing about other people's expectations," he replied. "They only have power over you if you let them. The moment you decide to write your own story, that's when everything changes." Emma stood up, Max following loyally at her heels. She approached Jason without fear, holding out something in her small hand. It was a slightly crumpled flower, picked from the park's garden. "My mom always said that when someone's brave enough to change, you should give them flowers," she explained seriously. The simple gesture carried more weight than any grand ceremony could have. Jason accepted the flower with the same care he might have shown a priceless treasure, understanding that in many ways it was exactly that, a symbol of trust rebuilt, of faith restored. "You know," Michael said, watching the interaction with a smile, "being a big brother isn't about being tough. It's about being there, something you never stopped doing, even when you thought you had to be someone else to do it." Mrs. Chen closed her photo album gently, but not before everyone caught a glimpse of one last picture. Jason and Michael as children, arms around each other, grinning at the camera with the unguarded joy of youth. "Sometimes," she said softly, "we have to lose our way to find our way back home." The afternoon had begun to cool, but something warm remained in the air. Something that felt like possibility, like hope, like the kind of change that starts in one heart and spreads outward in ever-widening circles. Bruce pushed himself fully upright, knowing his part in this story was drawing to a close. "In the movies," he said, "this would be where we fade to black, roll the credits. But real life doesn't work that way. Real life is about what happens after the big moment, all the small choices that come next." Jason stood, still holding Emma's flower, and looked around at the gathered faces. His brother in his police uniform, Mrs. Chen with her photo album, Emma with Max, Bruce Willis, who had stopped to make a difference, Officer Martinez, who had given change a chance to happen naturally. "I don't know exactly who I am without all the anger," he admitted, his voice carrying both fear and hope. "But I think I want to find out." Michael smiled, standing beside his brother. "That's the thing about starting over," he said. "You don't have to know who you're going to be. You just have to be willing to find out." The afternoon light caught the St. Christopher medal one last time, but now it seemed less like a reminder of the past and more like a beacon pointing toward the future. Max barked once, happily, as if adding his own approval to the proceedings. Bruce moved toward his car, but paused to look back at the scene, at the brothers reunited, at the community drawn together, at the change that had sprouted from a moment of potential violence and bloomed into something beautiful. "You know what the real secret is?" he asked, his voice carrying just far enough to reach those who needed to hear it. Heroes don't always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes, they're just people brave enough to let others see who they really are. The afternoon wrapped around them like a gentle embrace, carrying the promise of tomorrow and all the possibilities it held. Emma's flower in Jason's hand, Max's wagging tail, Michael's proud smile, Mrs. Chen's tears of joy. All of it came together in a moment that felt less like an ending and more like the opening chapter of a new story. As Bruce's SUV pulled away from the curb, the gathered community understood they had witnessed something rare and precious, not just a moment of change, but the birth of possibility. The afternoon light caught it all, turning everyday scenes into something magical. Two brothers walking together, a puppy playing without fear, a community coming together to support transformation. "So," Emma asked, looking up at Jason with unfettered hope, "will you help me teach Max some tricks tomorrow?" Jason's smile, when it came, was real and unguarded, the smile of someone who had finally found their way home. "Yeah," he said softly. I'd like that a lot." The afternoon continued its gentle progression toward evening, but something had changed on Maple Street. Something fundamental and true, something that would ripple outward in countless small ways in the days and weeks to come. A reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism aren't about saving the world. They're about saving ourselves, and in doing so, inspiring others to do the same. And somewhere in the distance, a dog barked joyfully, as if celebrating. The simple truth that love, forgiveness, and the courage to change can transform not just a moment, but a life. Not just a person, but a community. Not just a story, but the world itself, one small act of bravery at a time. Let us know in the comments what you would have done in this situation. Remember, true strength isn't about being tough. It's about being brave enough to be who you really are. Share this video if you believe in the power of second chances, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the hero that exists in everyone.